Okay, so here's a video about threats to internal validity. There's a little bit in here about external validity as well, but we're primarily focusing on internal validity because that's one of the questions that you'll be addressing on worksheet number 4. Did there appear to be any threats to internal validity? So now for those of you that don't feel like listening to a video, the readings that we have that have been in the past few weeks about internal validity are pretty clear. But for those of you who feel you need a little bit of a refresher, maybe don't remember it from your last research course, I'm providing this video. Again, a disclaimer, sometimes it's a little long, sometimes it's a little boring. Look how bored my dog, this is Tigger, by the way, my dog Tigger looks. You'll also see Lulu in this video. There is also another PowerPoint called Name That Threat to Internal Validity. If you want to play Name That Threat to Internal Validity with your friends at home, can't think of anything more fun. That is on Blackboard. That's actually just an exercise I do if you're lucky enough to be bored by me in classroom. So yeah, so there's a little special appearance for my dogs in that one too. Okay, so why are we talking about threats to internal validity, aside from the fact that it shows up on worksheet number 4? Is because threats to internal validity can decrease our assurance that the research study that we are looking at is an effective one and that it has rigor to the study. So basically, if a threat to internal validity increases the likelihood that there might be another reason that we see the results that we do in the research study. So that doesn't mean that we throw out the results of the internal validity of the research study. It's just something that we are aware of when we start when we look at a research study. So threats to internal validity compromise our confidence in saying that there appears to be a relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. And in intervention research, that is the intervention and the outcome. Okay, threats to external validity have more to do with generalizability. That means that the sample that we have appears to look like other groups that we are targeting the population question to. Okay, so I want you just to remember that validity of a measurement item is a bit different than internal validity in an experiment. Measurement validity has to do with how we are choosing to measure what we say we are going to measure, and there are different criteria for that. Internal validity talks about the whole research study in general and depends on the extent into which the criteria for causality are met, and refers to whether or not we can say that it appears that these results may be due to an actual result of the intervention and not due to chance. So what is so important about internal validity? Okay, internal validity says, based on the study design, how confident are we that the outcomes that we see following the intervention are a result of the intervention itself and not something else? Basically, it's the approximate validity with which we infer that a relationship between two variables is causal. Okay, so in an experiment or in any type of research study design, there is often some sort of threats, and they have certain names to them. Sometimes we can figure it out just by looking at it and saying, something doesn't seem right here. But there are names specifically to them. And those would be the types of things that we may ask you to identify on worksheet number 4. Okay, so selection bias is when a comparison group and an experimental group are initially different and is related to the methods used to assign subjects to the group. So remember what I said before, if I were to be running a research study and I were to select all my participants, or I were to ask for a convenience sample of who's interested in being in the group, those people might be people that are more interested in the study in particular, and that might influence the results. So selection bias often means how the group comes to be formed, or who volunteers for the experiment, or are the groups different in some way. Mortality or attrition means that from pre-test to post-test, there might be some dropout. Okay, so let's say I start with 50 participants in a research study on the pre-test, and then on the post-test, I only have 25. Okay, that means that there's attrition there, and that's a threat to internal validity because there's a difference in the amount of people on the pre-test and people on the post-test, and those people are important that dropped out. Usually those are the most important that you have to see. So again, that threat to internal validity is called mortality or attrition. Okay. Other types of threats to validity include the testing effect, and that whenever we do a pre-test and a post-test, and it's the same test, which it is most of the time, the participants learn from the pre-test, so that might impact the way that they answer the questions on the post-test. Another threat to internal validity is something called maturation, meaning that something outside of the experiment is happening to the participant that is influencing the way those questions are answered. Now, that could be that we're doing a longitudinal study that takes a long time, and maybe we're doing it on kindergartners' reading skills. Okay, so if we do a pre-test in September on kindergartners, and then we do a post-test in, let's say, June on kindergartners, and we notice that their reading skills have gone up, we can say, oh boy, I bet that was a great teacher, right? However, due to the maturation effect, we also know, if you've ever met a kindergartner, that their brains seem to be ready to learn. I remember kindergarten teachers used to tell me this. Their brains seem more ready to learn when they come back from Christmas for some reason. And that is because overall, kids are getting more mature by that time. And the average kid is now over 5 years old. Some of them are 5.5. Some of them are getting close to 6. And our brains are ready to receive that information a little bit better. So that could be that there's a change due to the natural passing of time, okay? It can also go the other way, though. If you are watching this video and I gave you a pre-test, right now you're probably getting bored, so you may not answer the questions as well because maybe you're getting sleepy or maybe you're getting hungry and you're just not paying as much attention. That's something that can be natural in the participant that occurs due to the natural passing of time. And then there's also statistical regression, meaning that if we have a large enough sample, scores start regressing to the mean anyway, because the larger the sample, the more likely we are to get more average cases, which kind of cancels out those results from the outliers. Okay. Other threats to internal validity can include the history effect. That was when an event outside the experiment happens that the participants are exposed to that perhaps maybe the researcher doesn't know about. So if we're doing a pre-test and a post-test, and let's say I'm doing a research review and I'm doing it with your class, and I'm doing it with Professor Ferruzzi's class, who's the other section, okay? And so then I give the intervention to all of you, and we don't give the intervention to Professor Ferruzzi's class. But let's say Professor Ferruzzi's class happens to all get a visit from a expert statistician who gives them all of the answers to the last quiz or something like that. Don't worry, we don't have any quizzes in this class. But let's say that happens. Okay, that's something that happens outside of the experiment that the researcher wasn't aware of that's going to affect the results. Okay, so other things could be instrumentation, meaning the measurement item isn't, or that there are trends that, that are affecting the study. Okay. Other ones are if you have two different groups, one being a comparison group or a control group, and one being the intervention group. Do those groups find out what's going on, or do they find out if they are in the treatment group or if they're in the comparison group? And if they find that out, or they find out what's happening in the other experimental condition, does that change the way they answer the questions? Those can turn into what we call the contamination effect. These are different types of threats that can happen, compensatory rivalry, and I just gave little examples of what could be going on there. And then also is differential selection. Anytime in a group that an experiment are not randomly formed, those groups are not randomly formed, differential selection is likely to pose a problem, and groups may have inherent differences. And if anybody has seen the show, I think you should leave. We could see right over here is some people shopping in a normal men's clothing store, and here's some people shopping at Dan Flash's. There is definitely a difference in these two groups, and that would be called differential selection. So if I were to give an intervention to this group and to this group, they are different types of groups, and therefore the results given could be it could be due to inherent differences in these two groups rather than rather than something attributed to the intervention. Okay, I hope that's clear. Don't feel you have to understand this completely. If you're able to figure out a few of those and understand a few of the buzzwords, as you read them in the research studies, you will note some of these differences, and you can make note of them on worksheet number 4, and it will help you understand the studies better. Hope that is helpful to everybody, and thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.